truth, ladies and gentlemen. The truth is not confusing. The truth cannot be explained away with nuances and assumptions. The truth is simple and easy to understand. And that's because it's supported by cold, hard facts. Facts that you can see and feel. Facts that show you what the truth is. And you as a jury, it is your job to determine what the truth is. And you must make that determination based solely on the facts that you heard here today. Now, you heard the state's case. It was pretty muddled and confusing, wasn't it? I know myself, when I heard it, I had a hard time following along with it. They made assumptions and innuendos. They left this picture up of this beautiful baby girl the whole time, and they brought an expert in who talked about dragons. And why did they do that? Because they didn't have any facts. They wanted you to see this picture of this beautiful baby girl and be so mad that you would blame somebody. But that's not how our system works. Our system is based upon the facts. And you must rely solely upon the facts. And these facts have to prove the case to you beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what's so great about our country. We have the greatest legal system in the world. And one of the reasons we do is because our Constitution says that you are innocent until you're proven guilty. What that means is that the defense, myself as counsel representing the defense and my co-counsel, we didn't have to prove anything to you here today. The burden of proof rests solely at this table right here. They had to prove their case to you. But what did they do? They put a picture here just to get you upset and looking to blame somebody. They brought an expert who rambled about all sorts of stuff. But was that proof? Was that proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Obviously, you can imagine where I feel on the issue. But think about it for yourself. Were you convinced? Did the facts convince you? Did they convince you beyond a reasonable doubt? So much so that you could send an innocent man to jail? Have they convinced you of that? And when you're thinking about this, think back to the testimony of Mr. Fricky, the neighbor. Think back to how he testified that Gary O'Neill, Kara's biological father, was picking the baby up and throwing her in the air. Could he have dropped her? Could that have caused the injury? If that's a reasonable possibility, then you haven't been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. And then think about all the other injuries she had. She had the cuts on her face. She had the cuts on her lips, the cuts on her nose. There was testimony that she had rolled off the bed a couple days earlier. Babies, they get hurt sometimes. I mean, if anybody else has ever had a kid before knows, you got to constantly watch them. And if it's possible that this injury happened in some other way besides Mr. Donaldson intentionally doing it, then you haven't been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. So let's talk about what the state did prove. They called Dr. Masters to the stand. And what he attempted to tell you about was that the injury, that all we could determine from the injury was that there was a blow to the head. That's all we know. Dr. Masters wasn't able to tell you who did the blow or if somebody intentionally did the blow. He couldn't conclude if it was from a fall or if it was from being struck. He talked about a timeline, but really, you heard our expert talk as well, and probably a little bit more clearly than his expert, was able to explain that we really don't know, we can't say beyond a reasonable doubt that the injury occurred within 24 hours. It could have been 36 hours, it could have been longer. We just really don't know. But Dr. Masters did talk about something that was pretty interesting. When he was talking about the pneumonia, this is important to understand, that in cases where there's an injury like this, if it occurred within the first 24 hours, you would see signs of pneumonia, which we did not see in this case. Pneumonia may take 20 to 30 minutes to start showing up, but if there was no pneumonia after 20 or 30 minutes, it would lead you to believe that this injury happened longer than 24 hours. So that leaves us with two possibilities. Either the injury happened longer than 24 hours ago, which we believe to be the case, or somehow the baby was injured. Mr. Donaldson realized the baby was injured, called his friend Jan Arnoldson, who walked over to his house, didn't drive. Jan Arnoldson inspected the baby, realized that the baby was hurt, called 911, had the paramedics come to their house, and then had the paramedics take the child to the hospital, where the child subsequently died. Now, is that possible that happened in 20 minutes? I don't even think that's, I mean, they're trying to prove to you their case beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't think you could prove that. I mean, I think that you could prove that's not the case beyond a reasonable doubt. As you can see, not only did the state's evidence not support their case, their evidence refuted their case. But yet, despite all this lack of proof, They want to put they want to send an innocent man to jail. A man who bravely served his country in the U.S. Army. A man who, by all accounts, was a loving stepfather. He loved those children. You heard Teresa Donaldson. You heard Mr. Donaldson get on the stand here. He loved those children. He loved Carol like it was his own child. What happened to the Donaldsons? That was a tragedy. To the Donaldsons as well as Mr. O'Neill. That was a tragedy. But it was also a tragedy for Mr. Donaldson because he lost his stepdaughter. Right? When there's a tragedy, sometimes people want to look for somebody to blame. In this case, the government found somebody to blame. The police found somebody to blame. That from the moment that the officer went to the hospital, he saw this as a murder, and he needed somebody to blame. So he found a stepfather. It was an easy target. Then the state got up here. They wanted to blame somebody too. They put this picture up here. They tried to enrage the jury because they didn't have any facts. They brought an expert on who rambled about all sorts of things and talked about dragons and just contradicted every statement he said. Told you that the statement was his original statement was that he swore under oath was that the deaths occurred in 6 hours. Apparently that wasn't good enough for the state. They needed to say that it happened in 3 hours. So he changed the testimony here today. And now it happened in 3 hours. What else would he have been willing to lie about? Or what else did he lie about? We really don't know. All we know is they wanted somebody to blame, and they found somebody. But luckily, though, Mr. Donaldson's fate does not rest in the hands of the government and Dr. Masters or the police. His fate rests in your hands. And it's up to you, the jury. Now, the opposing counsel, his proof, he wanted you to ask yourself what happened to Kara and why didn't Mr. Donaldson call 911? Who knows why he didn't call 911? Maybe he was scared. But is that the best proof they have, that the guy didn't call 911 right away when the baby was acting a little weird? That's their smoking gun? That's what they have? I have a question to ask you, and he's going to get a chance to get back up here and talk. I won't. I mean, that's the way it works. If we went like that, we'd both be going back and forth, and you guys would never be believing. I'm sure you're ready to get out of here. But ask yourself this question. What evidence did they have besides circumstantial evidence? Just show us one shred of evidence. He's going to get back up here and talk. And let's see if he can answer that question for you. Because if he can't, and you realize that they failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must find our client, Mr. Donaldson, not guilty. And I thank you.
All right. Did you really answer any questions? Did he convince you beyond a reasonable doubt? Or did he give you a reasonable doubt? Is it reasonable to assume that the person trained in the Army to shout for a medic when a fellow soldier was hurt, when he... I mean, that's okay? I mean, he just really didn't believe